Good evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Ankita Mukherjee. The Kashmir battle reaches the United Kingdom. India reacts sharply to a proposed Kashmir freedom rally in London. After its earlier attempts to internationalise the Kashmir issue were rebuffed, is Pakistan now resorting to a proxy war on foreign soil? Also on Left, Right and Centre tonight, an exclusive interview with British Prime Minister David Cameron. He speaks on a range of issues, including Narendra Modi's leadership as well as India-Pakistan ties. Also, actor Konkona Sen Sharma speaks up against housing apartheid in India after a Mumbai housing society says no to single women. All of that coming up later on in the show. But first, our big story tonight, reacting strongly against a proposed rally in London which will call for the independence of Kashmir. India has said this is a matter between New Delhi and Islamabad, adding that such a rally would be against an open society. Speaking to NDTV, the British Prime Minister made it clear that India and Pakistan ties were a bilateral issue. But the fact remains that his administration is letting this Kashmir rally go ahead. We asked tonight, having failed to get the UN to intervene on Kashmir, is this yet another pressure tactic by Pakistan, this time via proxies?
We don't want to see any incursions across the line of control, and we want to see good relations between India and Pakistan. We think it's very important that India and Pakistan have those conversations, and we'll do anything we can to try and to help.
It is normal for open societies to have platforms where people may like to express their own opinions. However, at times these platforms are misused by enemies of open societies, and therefore it is for those open societies to ensure that nothing is done that is inimical to their interest.
Such rallies have happened in the past as well, but the new government seemingly taking a strong stand. India's External Affairs Minister Sushma Swaraj told UK's Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg that this does not bode well for the relationship. UK has assured India that Kashmir is a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan, but in a country like theirs, a free country, a democracy, such protests cannot be stopped. Remember, this comes after Pakistan has been trying again to internationalize the Kashmir issue and have written to the UN, and India says that ceasefire violations on the border must stop.
This is not the first attempt to internationalize the issue. After a series of ceasefire violations on the line of control, Pakistan wrote to the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, but got without success. And this latest attempt isn't getting much appreciation either.
I have no problem with these people propounding an ideology, but it would be better doing it from here rather than from the cozy environs of London, Washington, Paris and places like that. Come to Kashmir, live here and then do it.
Clearly not giving up, it seems Pakistan is now using its proxy warriors to fight its battle on foreign soil. With Rahul in London, in New Delhi, Anchal Vora, NDTV.
Well, joining us at this point, KC Singh, former Secretary of the Ministry for External Affairs. KC Singh, several attempts to internationalize Kashmir, of course, whether it's Nawaz Sharif's speech to the UN General Assembly, Sartaj Aziz's first writing and then speaking to the UN Secretary General. In the light of all this, how should we read this latest rally proposal, a rally for independent Kashmir, an anti-India rally, so to speak, now being planned in London, which will eventually hand over a petition to the British Prime Minister?
Well, as your commentary said very clearly, the line was spelled out by Prime Minister in his UNGA address, where he said the conditions have to be created by Pakistan for a dialogue. And the Defence Minister today, Mr. Jaitley, in an interview to your channel, repeated it. He said, we are willing to talk to Pakistan, but their behavior has to be commensurate to a dialogue, which means behavior across the line of control, as well as whatever steps they're going to take in punishing those who committed 26/11, etc. There are a whole series of things. And it can be incremental. So government has not spelt it out how they want it. Now, obviously, Pakistan is stymied. They don't know how to go about it because India is just not willing to engage them and has laid new red lines which they had not seen before. And in between, also remember that President Musharraf, former President Musharraf, who's under house arrest, was also allowed to give an interview, obviously with the permission of the Pakistani government as well as the approval of the Pakistani army, where he said that, look, we are not wearing bangles and, we can start something in Kashmir and therefore catch the Indian army from both ends.
Right.
Now, this is all various things they're doing, old tricks from their old playbook, but none of that is working. But the issue is, what should be the British role? I think we've made a protest known to them. It is, they've allowed other protests in the past, etc. My view would be that just ignore it. After making a protest, ignore it, because the whole point of the Pakistani actions is to get your attention and get you riled. So ignore it. Let's see, they're talking of a 1 million person rally. 1 million is the total population of the Pakistanis in Britain.
But
I don't think all 1 million or 1.1 million are going to turn out. So let's see what that rally is and what they do. But in any case, independence is not there in any Security Council resolution.
A very quick point there, India has chosen not to ignore it. In fact, it's spelt its displeasure out in no uncertain terms for once. And Britain choosing to let that rally go ahead despite that. And will the UK risk offending India by doing that?
No, we must tell Britain that we take it amiss. For instance, when they were having a plebiscite in Scotland, how would they have reacted if we had a demonstration of, say, Scottish people in India, who won't be very many, but supposing you had a similar demonstration, how would they have taken it? Because, you are firing, you are going into the domestic politics of another country. And in any case, where is independence? In a Security Council resolution of 48, independence is not talked about. All that they talk about is a plebiscite, whether Kashmir is with India or Pakistan, and that also much water has flown down many rivers since then. So we made a protest known. That is that's right thing to do. The protest has to be conveyed, but I think beyond that, it would be good to just ignore it. Let them keep doing this.
Good to just ignore it. Lots of points that are being raised by KC Singh there, and I want to take them across to Wajahat Khan, defense journalist, joining us at this point from Islamabad. Wajahat, react first of all to that point. It does seem rather ludicrous to hold this rally in London at all. And logically speaking, this would be like holding a rally for Scottish independence in Delhi or Islamabad for that matter.
Yeah, I think that's a stretch. You know what scares me in that entire commentary by your guest is that, firstly, I mean, he's obviously never been to London. London is ground zero for global protests. Iraq, Wales, Afghanistan, Palestine, Gaza, Israel. There's rallies every couple of months with thousands of people in Britain, and the British have a very healthy tradition of allowing all sorts of rallies and protests, whether they are ridiculous or not, first of all. Secondly, I think if India really pushes the envelope on this, it becomes closer to behaving perceptively and optically like how Israel was behaving earlier this summer. I hope that never happens to India. You are dear neighbors, but this is kind of verging on the ridiculous, especially with the comparison about the Scots, etc. I don't buy it. The Brits have a very, very healthy political culture. The Brits have a very healthy political culture, and I think it is a little irresponsible.
Okay, even if we take your point about the British providing a platform
for a democratic country like India, it's a little irresponsible to quell
even if we take your point about Britain allowing this kind of platform for free speech, are we now seeing repeated attempts by Pakistan, both at the level of the government, whether it's the Prime Minister's speech at the UN General Assembly, whether it's Sartaj Aziz's writing and then speaking to the UN Secretary General, and now, having been repeatedly rebuffed, is this now an attempt to really go through proxies, fighting a Kashmir battle now on foreign soil, so to speak?
Firstly, I think there's a serious assumption there. You're calling the Kashmiris or the Pakistanis or the organizers or the hippies or the liberals or whoever is going to be participating in the so-called million-man march, a Pakistani proxy. I think that's presumptive, and I think that's a little naive, with due respect. What if there's local Brits there? What if there's people who've never been to Kashmir or Pakistan or India there? We're just being very hyper-nationalistic right now, and I think it's a really important time for all of us, especially at a very tense time in the subcontinent, to take off our hyper-nationalistic hats for a minute, to say goodbye to Islamism and Hindutva for a minute, and talk like serious statesmen and stateswomen. As far as Pakistan's proxy wars are concerned, I think there's enough lessons learned there. I'm not here to defend Pakistan's alleged, reported, or actual actions which go across the border or not. I'm not a representative of the state. However, as far as blaming an entire contingent of protesters who may or may not be related to Pakistan or the Pakistani state as proxies is a little presumptive and a little naive. This is the bottom line on Kashmir. I think we need to restart talking again. I think we had an excellent moment when you elected a very powerful, very popular man.
Restart talking, but K.C. Singh, as you were pointing out,
and then unfortunately the talking stopped. And guess what? You guys on your side, somebody decided that the talking must end. That was unfortunate, and I really hope it begins again. And I think, according to the rules of diplomacy, the guys who stop talking have to start talking again.
K.C. Singh, come in on this because this reflects on a point you were making earlier. The government really stressing the point over and over again that Pakistan must create the atmosphere for talks to resume.
But you know, what is happening is that strategically, I agree with that. That's good strategy because they're trying a different approach rather than go down the way of NDA or UPA 1 and 2, because then you get into the same conundrum. So what they're doing is that let's redraw some of the red lines. But the problem is that you must tie your tactics to the strategy. If you keep repeating the same thing like a mantra, beyond a stage you lose sympathy abroad. And that's what Pakistan is trying to play on, because the international community doesn't know the nitty-gritty details of all this. But they will say, look, there are thousands of people marching in London, something must be wrong somewhere. So I think Indian tactics have to change to achieve that strategy. I think somewhere just repeating the same thing will make us appear obdurate, and therefore Pakistan as the underdog, as the victim in all this, and that is what Pakistan is attempting, to get the international sympathy. And how to counter that simply by threatening Britain is not going to change it.
All right. Also joining us from Islamabad at this point, we have with us Shehzad Chaudhry, retired Vice Air Chief Marshal. Mr. Chaudhry, how would you respond to the points being made by K.C. Singh right at this point? Is this in an attempt really to whip up sentiment on Kashmir once again on foreign soil as it's being viewed over here?
Well, you know, I mean, Britain is known to have agitated and demonstrated against wars all around. Vietnam War was one example, and recently, about 10-12 years back, they took to the streets on Iraq War. Similarly for Palestine and Gaza. So that's been the history of the Brits. I mean, they have a very, very definite stance on freedom of expression and the way that people demonstrate there. And there is that laxity available to them to do so. We are also aware that there are a number of Kashmiris who live in Britain, both from the Indian occupied Kashmir as well as the Pakistani part of the Kashmir. And so therefore, for them to be able to connect to what's happening back home is a very natural thing. So I really do not know that whether we can begin to point towards the fact that this is sponsored by one or the other. I also am aware that there are a huge number of Indians that are living in Britain. I've lived there myself for 4.5 years, 5 years, and I very much know that the Indians were present there.
Mr. Chaudhry,
So I would imagine that if Pakistan uses people as proxy, I think India has a much larger and a much bigger pool to begin to use people
I'd
as
like
proxy
K.C.
there.
Singh to respond to that, but I'd also like to put it to you that a lot of pro-Kashmir campaigners have already come forward to voice their doubts about what this march really hopes to achieve, and they think that it might in fact be inimical to Kashmir's interest to have a rally such as this. And how would you respond to them?
Well, are you asking me?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you know, the point is that the Kashmir, the LOC and the working boundary have been active for the last, well, what shall I say, maybe 6-8 weeks now. And the people who've lost their lives on both sides of the border. So I would imagine that there will be sensitivities to that. There will be Kashmiri sensitivities to that. And one should imagine that if you're not talking to each other, well, really the problem is not going anywhere. The problem exists, and that is why you fire at each other. It's as simple as that. I think that's the most reductionist part of looking at this issue. Since there is a problem, that's why we end up into these situations. And the only way forward, or the only way ahead, is to be able to communicate and talk to each other and give hope to everybody in Pakistan, in India, to the Kashmiris themselves, to the Kashmiris diaspora living abroad. I think that's how you give them hope, by talking to each other.
Anyone is really underplaying the importance of dialogue here. But K.C. Singh, come in on this. Are we seeing a very different phase of engagement with Pakistan now? And is that part of the reason perhaps that we're now seeing, this call for rallies on foreign soil and other attempts to now take Kashmir out of a bilateral framework and make this more international?
Let me address two things. One, which Air Marshal raised, that we have an Indian community there, etc. Let me give you two examples. After the Babri Masjid destruction in 1993, a lot of Pakistanis in UAE, they protested. The bus drivers and this and that, they protested. And the UAE government I think schools were shut. So they just put the headmasters, UAE authorities said, you are not allowed to do this. This is not the platform for Indo-Pakistani rivalry or political debate or demonstrations. And a lot of them were repatriated, and that just shut it. Now, would England want, under the pretext of freedom of expression, certainly they don't want tomorrow Indians to do it, and then the Pakistanis. I mean, this is not, it's not a childish game. And Britain has to understand that. They can allow them to demonstrate, but not march through the streets. Let's see how they do it.